A biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
We're back today with some insights into the extraordinary alignments of the various developments around the world with biblical accounts of what happens in the end times. Western nations right now are working to avoid full-scale war in the Middle East. And even if you know just a little about Bible prophecy, you might be asking, is the end near? Well, our special guest today has documented a chronological summary of the history of humanity, the forces that have caused many of the world's battles, and his thoughts on the devastation that may well be ahead of us. Peter Durbin connects Bible prophecy to events like the past and current wars in the Middle East, or the potential downfall of the United States, and also the climate change debate as a platform for global control. Peter Durbin is a successful businessman in finance and investment. He studied world history together with economic, spiritual and political events. His new book is called What's Really Going On? Peter Durbin, a special welcome along to 2020.
Thanks for having me with you, Neil.
Peter, let's start with maybe just the headlines, in case there might be some listeners thinking, I wonder how important a conversation like this might be. Well, some headlines today. Israeli intelligence believes Iran is ready to stage a direct attack within a matter of days in a move that could spark all-out war in the Middle East. These things are happening right now, and no doubt you've got a long history as a Christian believer, but to have your book being released right now is very timely, is it not?
Yes, I'd like to think so. I mean, what's going on in the Middle East is it's been going on for a long time in one way, shape, or form in another. So yes, it is timely that it's that there's a war going on, and no one wants a war in the Middle East, not at all. But we've been having wars in the Middle East for a long time, and regrettably, I suspect they're likely to continue.
Is it the case, though, that there might have been wars in the Middle East for a long, long time, but nothing of the sort of scale that seems to be building up right now around Israel? How do you reflect on that?
Oh, that's true. I mean, as we discuss in the book, I am of the view that the end times are getting closer, and as the book of Revelation and other books in the Bible tell us very clearly that as the end times become very close, wars will increase. And, we're all aware that the Battle of Armageddon, which I'm not saying is here now, which I don't think it is here now, but when that happens towards the end of the tribulation, that will be the one of the final war, if you like, before Jesus returns. But that's the Bible says that wars will increase before the tribulation, and I suspect that that's what's starting to happen now. So we arguably shouldn't be surprised that this is going on now.
We might have been able to draw some conclusions in earlier generations, past decades. And as you say, there's been an awful lot of attention around biblical end times, and people have read into the circumstances, biblical interpretations for what might be happening today. Certainly, though, when you look at what's going on today with the Middle East and with all of the proxies that are involved in this process and the globe taking sides one way or another, this might actually look much more like the biblical end times scenario than any other time.
Look, I think that's probably true, but I still think what we're seeing now is a foretaste of what's to come. I mean, what is to come, as described in Revelation. It's important to say this is not my opinion. I'm taking this out of God's Word, the Bible, and it talks about the end time battle of Armageddon, which is not right here, right now, but that talks about an army of 200 million people marching from the east. There's only so many countries that can do that. So we're not seeing that here now, but I think what we're seeing is a foretaste of, what is to come in the Middle East.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I know in your book you say no man knows the time or the hour, and there's all sorts of issues around that. But you say that once things get going and those times are upon us, then you'll be able to plot some of the events according to a biblical foundation. How do you describe the way the end might outwork when it comes to a start for what you might even call a great tribulation?
Yes, well, the tribulation is split up into two halves. The first half, some call the tribulation. The Bible calls it the tribulation, and the second half is called the Great Tribulation. If you look at the first event in that starts in the tribulation, it talks about the emergence of the Antichrist. Now, I don't think that will be particularly easy to nail down to one day. The emergence of the Antichrist. That's not going to be easy to pin down day one. But also. But once you get into, there'll be other events. One of the first judgments in the tribulation, the first half, is that it says that Revelation says that there will be a quarter of the world's population will die of the sword, famine, or plague. So a quarter of the world's population, let's call the population of the world 8 billion people, some number like that. A quarter of that's 2 billion people. I think we'll certainly spot 2 billion people dying. And now that won't be on a particular day either. So we won't be able to. I don't think we narrow that down to the day. And I'm not sitting here trying to predict the day or the hour, because no one's to know that. That's in God's realm. But I think equally He wants us to be aware, awake, and be prepared. I'm not trying to predict the day or the hour or anything like that, because we're not to know that. But, God, at the same time, God gives us a lot of guidance in the book of Revelation as to what's coming up. And He did that for a purpose. He wants us to know some of what's coming up. Where you'll get a definitive date is in the mid-tribulation period. There'll be the abomination of desolation, and that will be we don't exactly know what that is. But most people seem to think that it will be some abominable event that will occur in the temple in Jerusalem. And I think when that happens, it will become clear, and that, I believe, will happen on a specific day, and that will tell us when we are in the middle of the tribulation. And then after that, it might be clearer as to exactly the timing of it. So the timing of God doesn't, I think he tells us quite a bit, but He doesn't give us the hour and the day, and I'm not trying to predict that, but there's a lot of events there that when the tribulation and the Great Tribulation come, that will become clear that we are in the tribulation and the Great Tribulation.
So there's no date setting happening today. It's not about date setting, but there is, isn't there, a sense in which you could put your head in the sand and just try to ignore the events that are going on today and think that somehow or other there can't be any special alignment with biblical prophecy. But there is actually advantage in understanding what God is doing, because there's something in the motivation of your whole life which becomes very important when you appreciate that God is doing things and there are issues at hand which may be very significant for the world.
So absolutely. I mean, I'm a financial planner by trade, and so I can't think to not be prepared. We should. I spend all day preparing people's lives or helping them prepare for their lives, and this book is certainly a different slant to that. But I think we are told to be prepared. God tells us that in the Bible, and I think if we can help prepare, make aware, and awake some people, that would be a great outcome from today and from the book that we've written, because that's the purpose of writing the book, is to make people aware of what really is going on out there, because most people are oblivious to it.
And very sobering once you start getting into the nitty-gritty and what horrendous things may well come with end times events. As you say, potentially a quarter of the world's population to be lost in an event, whether it's famine or whether it's war. It could be thermonuclear war, all sorts of things like that. Let's not continue to just dwell on that, but one of the things you do draw attention to, which is so powerful, is that these events of the end times can't happen until global communications are possible. And we might look around us, global communications, very possible right now. How do you reflect on global communications as a sign of the end?
Well, I think there's no doubt that, global communication is with us here. I mean, as you rightly point out, it can't happen until everyone has heard the gospel. And do the people in deepest, darkest Africa or Brazil or the Amazon jungle, do they know? Well, there will be. God's word is always true, and His prophecies always occur. So God will have the view that everyone will have heard at a particular time. But it's fair to say we're pretty close to that now. But God will always be true to His word, and everyone will have had the opportunity to have heard His word at the time. But we're very close to global communication being available to everyone as we speak.
You've written a book, and your book provides a potential timeline of when the end times may commence and detailed logic behind this reasoning. This has clearly been a sort of almost a lifelong pursuit for you. Is this something it's a passion? I mean, have you got a reputation amongst your friends? Oh, here comes Peter. He's going to be talking about the end times. Is this the sort of passion that's driven your study here?
Look, I like to, think, and a lot of what's, I've written in the book is things I've learned over a long period of time. Equally, I had to do quite a bit of research to get the detail and whatever else. But the timeline, I think, is important. I mean, there's many people, that will say man has been on Earth for millions or even billions of years. The Bible clearly says that's, not the case. The Bible says that God created Adam and Eve, and people have traced going back to, where Adam and Eve is when they were created. Now, they can't get it down to the day or the hour. They probably can't even quite get it down to the year. But different people have done different calculations. But the Bible's got an awful lot of information in there as to how long people lived and that sort of stuff. And as the best estimates that we can come up with is that Adam was created by God in approximately 3,960 BC. Now, and then in the book we go through the genealogy from there all the way through. I think it goes for over 10 pages, the genealogy from there to here. And obviously, as we get closer to Christ's birth and death and that sort of thing, the records become even clearer. But it's the genealogy might be a few years out, but it's not going to be a long way out from that. So to think man was here on Earth for millions or billions of years, I don't believe is correct, and I don't believe that's what the Bible teaches us.
Helping you make sense of life, culture and current events from a biblical perspective. 2020 on Vision.
We are talking biblical end times today, and our talkback line is open on 1800 316 316. We'll just hold off taking some calls for a few moments while we talk about some other things that are going on in the world right now. Peter Durbin is our special guest. His new book is called What's Really Going On? Peter, let me ask you about some of the elements, and we might need to go through fairly quickly, and listeners might like to enlarge if they have a particular question. But you discuss climate change and the fossil fuel debate. What are your thoughts on this and end-time scenarios that we might understand from the Bible?
Let me say I'm all in favour of renewable energy, and I'm not a anti-green or anything along those lines. And my aim in writing the book is not to convince people or otherwise of climate change or otherwise, because I'm not a climate change expert. What I will say is that I believe that climate change is going to be used by the elite, called the World Economic Forum, as a means of controlling the world, because it's all about control, and their aim will be that they will want to control us, and everything they tell us to do, we must do in order to save the planet. It will principally be a mechanism to control us, and it's just the vehicle to do that. So you can have, if you look at what's in the tribulation with, all the things like, wars, famines, earthquakes, hail, all the massive things, it's going to make climate change look like a drop in a mill pond as to what's coming up. And I don't want to discredit, whether it actually says in the Bible that we will, as the end times approach, that we will get more of these, plagues, earthquakes, fires. So when we're hearing things like this, we shouldn't be surprised that it's happening. But the key thing is not so much to focus on climate change, it's to focus on that will be the tool that they use to control us, because it's all about controlling us.
Okay, control is the issue here, and your expertise is in finance and investment, and when you reflect on the World Economic Forum and the sorts of thoughts that have been propagated from there, what are your thoughts on their aims and objectives? And if you're talking about sort of, global control, is that shaping as something that you might see aligns with a biblical objective of control like this?
Absolutely. The control that we're talking about is predicted in Revelation. If you read the World Economic Forum's objectives, and you can read them on the internet, it's fine. And if you read them, they all sound okay. But the devil in what's underneath those, what their underlying objectives is about control. But the World Economic Forum openly talk about a one world government and a one world religion, and that is also talked about in the Bible. And so there'll be one world government, and that's what they're aiming to create. And I believe the World Economic Forum is the vehicle that will be driving that one world government and one world religion.
And with globalism, so many are saying this is a time in the history of the world when that is a possibility. Hey, we're taking calls on 1800 316 316. Let's squeeze in some calls here. Graham is in Bunbury in WA. Hey, Graham, welcome along.
Good morning, Neil. Good morning, Peter.
Morning to you. What are your thoughts here, Graham?
Just as curious about this and following this, and as indeed we're actually expected to do, like Peter said, I drew out a timeline along some long pieces of wood about 4 or 5 metres long, and basically worked out what you were saying, Peter, was 3,000 years before Christ for Adam, and then put Jesus on the timeline and lots of other events in there, including Turkey and 69 or something. But I also added in there, all the way along the bottom, I added what the world's population was. So obviously it started at 2, and then it went up as we created, more babies and whatever. And then it dropped back to just a few again as we went through the flood. And then my timeline just stayed flat all the way along my 6 metres of drawing until we got to, the 50s and 60s, and then it started to go up a little bit. And then in the 70s, the world population just ramped straight up vertical on my chart. And I'm like, whoa, the Earth is filling up fast. I think there's a sign there.
Good thoughts there, Graham. Let's get a thought or two here. Peter, on world population and the fact that even in these previous decades, there's a huge spike in the growth of world population. It's just snowballed to this point. What are your thoughts for Graham?
I didn't quite hear everything he said, but he's quite right that population is growing. It's fair to say the World Economic Forum is, they openly talk about reducing the population, depopulation, and that's because their argument is that we don't have the resources to feed and provide energy for the world's increasing population, and that the increasing population is demanding more energy, more fossil fuels, if you like. That's killing the economy. So their aim is to reduce the population that we have. That's the main comment I'd say about population.
Okay. Graham, anything further to add there? Because, with a huge population and predictions, biblical predictions, quarter of the world's population dying, whether it be war or famine or disease. Graham, any thoughts further on population?
No, I think I think it's just a valid point that I could see the population going. I wonder how long it is till the Earth is full, and maybe. And then the other thing, of course, is that with global communication, we watch the Olympics and we see people preaching the gospel in their ceremonies and bits and pieces. And I think, how many billions of people are actually watching that today? And we saw back when the World Towers, the Twin Towers collapsed, the whole world was watching that almost. Obviously, there's some remote communities around that don't see it, but yeah, scary times. But
Yeah. Graham, thank you so much for your call. 1-800 316 316 to join in our conversation. Let's take another call. Chris is in Melbourne. Hey, Chris, welcome.
Welcome. Good on you, Neil and Peter. Yeah, I just want to make a comment regarding, the rapture, and the timeline when it might happen, and also the population. What he said. That will be decided by how many people are taken up in the rapture. So the Bible says, in Revelation, when God pours out his judgment, maybe a third of the earth is destroyed. Well, the amount that's destroyed depends on how many people are still left behind. So, but regarding the rapture, Jesus died at 33, 2,000 years, 2033. So roughly, I believe, he doesn't say, he don't set dates and times, but the year is roughly around 226. And the middle of the 7 years will be 2030, roughly, which is the New World Order's agenda, 2030 agenda.
Chris, making a good point there, and I know that Peter can't hear as well as he'd like to be able to. There's a question here around the rapture on a timeline in end times and population issues around post-rapture, because Christians potentially taken out of the tribulation time, and then there'd be a different population left behind. Thoughts here for Graham? For Chris?
It's fair to say that some Christians believe in a tribulation rapture and some in a post, and it's certainly not 100% clear. So we need to be respectful of both. I need to be respectful of both opinions. The second comment I would make is that yes, a quarter of the population is killed in the tribulation, but secondly, in the Great Tribulation, it says a third of the population dies. So I think you're at well over half of the population dies during the tribulation period, which is well over 4 billion people. So that's the main thing. But so let's assume if Christians are taken out pre-tribulation, that begs the question: how many Christians are on the world living at this present time? And I don't know the answer to that. It's hopefully hundreds of millions and maybe more, but I think there's going to be a lot more people killed than what's taken in a rapture.
Before we take another call, Peter, come back to this timeline idea, because you haven't just got a timeline for the end times. You've been tracking timelines for the history of humanity. What's the importance of actually having Christian believers understand that timelines may be very important in the overall picture?
Absolutely. I mean, as I said earlier, it's as best we can work out, we believe that God created Adam and Eve somewhere around the vicinity of 3,960 BC. It might be a year or two either way. From when Adam was created by God, it was a further 2,000 years to when Abraham was on the earth. And then it was a further 2,000 years until Jesus Christ was crucified around AD 31. Now, it might be a year or two either side of that. We can't be 100% sure. But if you work on the year that Christ was crucified in AD 31, so from Adam till Jesus' crucifixion is 4,000 years. and a further 2,000 years would be AD 2031, commonly called 7 years away. Now, that would be a total of 6,000 years that man has been on this earth. Now, why is that important? A lot of what we talk about in the book is how God uses in the Bible numbers on many, many occasions. For example, there was the number 40 was always a period of trial. I mean, Jesus was in the wilderness for 40 days. Noah was in the ark for 40 days. 12 was always a symbol of leadership or management, the 12 tribes of Israel, the 12 disciples. So 12 was used many, many times. The number 7 is used more than 550 times in the Bible and symbolises completion. If we go back to creation, the world was created in 6 days, and then there was a day of rest, the 7th day. In the week, we have 6 days where God authorises us to work, and then the day of rest, the Sabbath. Farms were deemed to be, you could work them for 6 years, and then 1 year of fallow, 6 and 1. So the number 6 is the number for man, and 7 is the number for God. In the Bible, it says that to God, a day is like 1,000 years. We all know in the Bible that Jesus will reign on this earth for 1,000 years. I think it is highly likely, it doesn't say this in the Bible, but I think it's highly likely that man will be on earth for 6,000 years, and then Jesus will reign on this earth for 1,000 years. And that would be in line with 6,000 years of man and 1,000 years of Jesus reigning on earth. So that the numbers there would be totally in line with how God has operated in the Bible, where numbers are important and symbolic. 6,000 years, as best of man living on this earth, would be somewhere in the vicinity of 2031, give or take a couple of years.
So that 6,000 years would be up within the next decade. And when we're talking timelines and calculating those things, and you've given tremendous reasoning there why this might be important, and then to see the sorts of events that we are now observing unfolding around the world might lead you to believe that these are end times days. Hey, we're taking calls on 1800 316 316. Let's take a call. Eloise is in Emerald in Queensland. Hey, Eloise, welcome along.
Hi, Neil. Hi, Peter. Thank you.
Thank you, Eloise. What are you thinking?
Well, I have a question. You've talked about Christians are to prepare for these end times. That's why we're told all this in the Bible. And so, Peter, given your study of economics and finance, I was just wondering, do you have any practical suggestions for how Christians can prepare financially for these end times if they are going to be, very soon upon us?
Okay, Peter, did you catch that question? What are your thoughts for Eloise?
No, could you repeat the question for me,
please? Okay,
so
it's about preparation for end-time scenarios that we're talking about today. And given your expertise in economics and finance, Eloise is saying, is there any practical suggestions that you might have for believers to prepare for times to come?
The first thing that you should do is prepare your heart and have Jesus in your heart. That is the purpose of the book, is to make people aware of this. So if they're already Christian, that's great. I think a second thing to prepare is tell others, and that's the purpose of writing the book, is for me to tell others. But equally, we've all got a role. Christians have got a role to play, and they should also be telling others about Jesus. So that's the first thing we should do to prepare ourselves and help to prepare others. To take that to another level, you probably need to have a view on whether it's pre or post, whether the tribulation is pre or post. And the world is divided. Christians are divided on that number, on that event. If you believe that in pre-tribulation, that the rapture is pre the tribulation, it's happy days. You're taken away and to be in heaven with Jesus. There are many people that also believe in the post-tribulation that the rapture will be post, and that will occur at the same time. Now, I do respect that view. If that was the case, that means Christians will live through the tribulation. And that would be preparing for that is much more difficult and much more complex. In Matthew 24, Jesus, when the disciples asked, "What should we do? Tell us about the end times." And one of the verses in Matthew 24 is, "You should, if you're in Judea, head for the mountains." So it's a very much an in-depth conversation as to what you would need to do. But in short, if you believe in a post tribulation rapture, preparing for that is a whole new ball game as to how a Christian could prepare.
Eloise, anything further to add?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
It is a complex topic.
All right. It is complex. Eloise in Emerald, thank you so much for your call. 1-800-316-316 to join into our conversation. Let's take another call. Graham is in Tasmania. Hey, Graham, welcome.
Good morning, gentlemen. Genesis 49, when Jacob told his sons what the future would be, talked about Judah being a lion, a very strong lion, who would tear things to pieces. If we go into Zechariah 12, we see that times at the end, that Israel is going to be besieged by people, and everyone that tries to destroy Israel will be tore to pieces. And Israel will continue a quarter of it right till Jesus Christ comes back. And we now are coming to the situation where Israel's strength is holding back those who want to destroy her, holding them back to that time of a trade that Israel will be allowed to sacrifice on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. And that's when that comes to that, we know we've got about 7 years, 3 years of fantastic prosperity, and 3.5 years of hell when the tribulation starts.
Graham, good thoughts in there, and I'm not sure if Peter's been able to hear there, a reflection there on Genesis 49, Jacob telling his sons what the future would be, and some reflection on Zechariah 12, Israel besieged by people, but Israel's strength holding back enemies, and until such a time as sacrifice is able to resume on the Temple Mount. I hope I've reflected, Graham, okay there, but any thoughts there, Peter?
The Temple Mount, there is a view that there will be sacrifices on the Temple Mount before Jesus returns. There has been some work done, and some people have the view that the sacrifice in the temple, that the actual temple was not actually on the Temple Mount. Now, I'm not an expert on that. That's not but some people have the view that the temple was actually not on the Temple Mount, but further down the hill. I have been to Jerusalem, but that because it's very hard to imagine that the Islam people, the Muslims, will allow the Jews to build a temple on the Temple Mount, but it's potentially that the temple will be built, but not on the Temple Mount where it was. So I think that's certainly biblical, that there will be sacrifices in the temple prior to the Jesus coming again.
Okay, and archaeological controversies, that's another whole discussion as well. But I hope that's answered or contributed to the conversation and the things that you've been suggesting, Graham. I'll say farewell. Thank you so much, Graham. Good input. Let's take another call. Vince is in Brisbane. Hey, Vince, welcome. Are you there, Vince?
Christopher, Peter.
Vince.
Just one sec, yeah. I had a question. I've often argued, sometimes with people really anti-Semitic, they think the synagogue of Satan, refers to Israel. But for me, I think, why not consider, say, somebody like a nefarious nominal Jew like George Soros? To me, I think he's the type that would fit more the bill for the for the synagogue of Satan, like the fake Jews. I would just like to know what Peter's thoughts might be on that.
Okay, and I know Peter can't hear you, so thoughts here around the anti-Semitism, but Vince reflecting the thought that there might be other players involved other than potentially Islam here, thoughts about the likes of a George Soros, those sorts of global financiers that tend to finance a left-wing agenda and anti-Israel. I hope I've reflected Vince and his comments there. Any thoughts here, Peter?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, anti-Semitism has been around, for thousands of years, and basically what's going on in the world and what has been going on forever, and people need to understand, is that there is a battle between God and Satan. And it's been going on since Satan was kicked out of heaven before the earth was created. So, and what we talk about in what's really going on is that ongoing battle and how it's played out. We talk about what's happened in the past, the battle between God and Satan. I give lots of examples of that, many from the Bible. What's the battle between Satan and God now, what's going on, and then the tribulation period, and how that God will eventually be victorious over Satan. So when you see the Jews, as we know, are God's people, and as we know, Isaac was blessed by Abraham, and Ishmael did not receive the blessing. The Arab nations come from Ishmael, and the concern is that that people that are against the Jews are against God, and because they are God's people. So people that are against the Jews are typically against God. And we need to remember that the Bible says that those that bless the Jews will be blessed, and those that do not bless the Jews those that hurt the Jews will be hurt. So anyone like a George Soros, who's your caller is absolutely right, but I think you'll find they're not backing God, they're backing the enemy. Because anti-Semitism's everywhere, but they're backing Satan, they're not backing Jesus. Call God.
Okay, Vince, thank you so much for your call. Let's put a line under callers now. A few things just to cover off before we have to end our conversation. Of course, these things can go on, and the depth is quite incredible once you start getting into biblical study and those end times scenarios. Let me just reflect a couple of things here, and maybe even skip through some of the important issues, because one of the things you do say, Peter, is that the world has the ability to exterminate itself. And that's something that might be in line with a biblical understanding of what can happen in the end times as well. You also reflect on the fact that the Jews will be united and returned to their homeland. And I think anyone who's looking at the news and even listening to any of the conversations we'll often have on this program will recognize that Jewish people from all over the world have been doing Aliyah and returning to the homeland, and that in itself and a fulfillment of end times prophetic insight. But I want to pick up on something quickly here, and I know we're running out of time. You say that the time of tribulation will see the largest revival that the world has ever seen. Reflect on a few things here, Peter, because sometimes when we think of end time scenarios and all the negatives that come along with that, sometimes we're neglecting the positives. But this has to be a positive, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And Revelation clearly says that there'll be 144,000, they will be Jewish evangelists, and they will convert many people to Christianity, to an understanding of God during the tribulation. And it says in Revelation that the number of people that become Christians during the tribulation will not be able to be counted. They'll be like grains on the sand. There'll be so many. So the biggest revival that the world has ever seen will occur in the tribulation. So that'll be a praise point. Absolutely, yes.
The thought of one world religion, that would be crossing the mind of a lot of listeners today. What do we do to remain authentic and biblical and to resist the thought of a one world religion? Because in the scriptures, that's painted as being a very bad thing. Any thoughts from you?
Oh, absolutely. The one world religion, and we do have a section in the book on that describes what the one world religion will be like. But it's basically the views of the World Economic Forum as to all the things that the one world religion. But there will certainly be no God in the one world religion. It will be, you will follow us. This is what we'll do. We'll save the planet, and it's all those sorts of things, but it's got nothing to do with God, the one world religion. It's just a belief system in believing in themselves. We are all gods, but it won't be anything like the, a Christian religion that we are familiar with.
So stay true to a biblical foundation for Christianity, and of course hand in hand with the one world religion, the one world government. And your take is, as someone with expertise in finance and investment, the International Monetary Fund, already combining a person's internet search history with their credit score. And people who score poorly could be restricted in their travel or their purchasing goods and services. This is sort of a biblical scenario too, isn't it?
Well, this is already happening in China. That if your credit score is not good enough in China, you're not allowed to purchase, you're not allowed to travel. So that China's ahead of the game, but that will come here. They've certainly got the technology to do it with internet search engines, but it's already happening in China, and it will happen here. I mean, a likely scenario is that we will have a financial collapse, and the likely collapse is likely to be in 2029, and the reason for that is the 7-year cycle. We back to the number 7. We had a financial collapse in 1987. The stock market crash of 87. 1994, the market was down over 25%. 2001 was the dot-com bust. 2008 was the GFC. 2015, the market was down over 25%. 2022, market was down a similar amount. The next one will be 2029, and I have a view that may be the big one. Time will tell. I hope not.
And the thought around that, and central bank digital currencies, is this one of the scenarios? This is being talked about. These things are being put into place in nations around the world. Is this something that you can say is part of end time scenarios?
Oh, absolutely. What's going to happen is cash will go. That's a given. Bank accounts will encourage you, and then I believe they'll force you to transfer your cash accounts to central bank digital currencies. They'll force you to have a digital ID, and I believe that you won't be able to transact without a central bank digital currencies and a computerized ID. And why is that a problem? Central bank digital currencies are programmable. And what that means is if you're not behaving as they want you to, they can just cancel your currency. It's just gone. And it's all about control. So that will happen. It's being trialled at different stages in 138 countries as we speak. It's implemented in 4, and central bank digital currencies are coming whether you like it or not.
Okay, let's try and end here on a high note, because, there could be some who might be, shaking in their shoes and worried about these things that are coming. And no doubt, if there are some dreadful things that we've been talking about ahead of us, that will not be an easy thing for any of us in the world. But what are you thinking we take away from this around the purposes of God and the value of understanding these things and what God is doing in the earth?
We've got to remember that life is a test. We're here for 60 to 100 years, but the main game is spending life in eternity. Where do you spend life in eternity? Many people believe in life after death. Christians believe that we go to heaven, and there's lots of people believe, we go to heaven. Some people believe in hell as well. But the Bible talks a lot about heaven and a lot about hell as well. But we need to be prepared for what lies ahead, whether the tribulation is soon or not. Either way, we're going to pass away, and we need to prepare for that. And, my view as a Christian is that people that accept Jesus as their saviour will go to be with him in heaven, and those that don't won't, because that's what the Bible teaches us. And if people can get anything out of this conversation or this book, it's we need to prepare by accepting Jesus as their saviour.
So many dimensions to our faith. Whether we were talking about all of the challenges of understanding God as creator and a biblical view reflecting the reality of what God has done. But also now we get to the future and a biblical view of what God is about to do. These things are challenging, and people have different opinions at times on the way those things are interpreted. But let me point you to getting a hold of Peter's new book. Peter Durbin has written a book. It's called What's Really Going On? What's Really Going On? And here's someone with expertise in finance and investment who's able to reflect on some of these things that are going on in the world, reflecting on timelines from a biblical view. Peter, when people get a hold of your book, do you see it as an easy read? What sort of person is going to really sort of, read it cover to cover and absorb everything in it? What are you hoping there for listeners getting a hold of your book?
One of the things I said in the book is, who's this book aimed at? I almost jokingly said it's for people that are alive and expect to die one day, and I think that covers most of us. So I think but I've certainly I've tried to write it in a very easy reading context. It's short form. It is 280 pages long, but it's you could write a book on every chapter, but I've just tried to do it almost in summary form so that it's quick moving, because the book starts before creation and ends in eternity. So there's a lot of ground to cover in that. So each chapter covers, it's broken up into 4 parts: the past, the present, the future, and how we should respond to that. So I think it's as easy read as I could possibly make.
And for listeners, you can get a hold of it at online booksellers. So wherever you're listening in, you'd be able to simply Google the name of Peter Durbin's book, What's Really Going On, and you'll be able to get that on Amazon and other online booksellers. For people to connect with you personally, Peter, is there a particular connection point that you like?
Yes, you can get a bit of a summary and commentary on the book at the website. It's peter-durbin.com. So peter-durbin.com. You can go there. There's a bit of a summary there. You can order the book from there if you wish. There's an excerpt from the book there. There's some commentary there that gives you a little bit of background information first, and you might find that helpful. peter-durbin.com. The book is called What's Really Going On? Peter Durbin, thank you so much for taking some time to share these thoughts with us today on 2020. My pleasure.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.